Recording has been started.
Good evening, everyone. Our viewers in US, and good morning, very good morning to our viewers in India. It's very early, 6:30 a.m. there. We are ready for yet another session of roundtable discussion for the Council for Strategic Affairs. And we have a very interesting discussion today on structural and economic and banking reforms in India. So before we start formally, I will run through some of the introductory slides. This is the announcement you might have seen. We have a very distinguished panel of speakers and discussants. They are Mr. Tulsi Tawari, Dr. Sat Parashar, and Dr. Vibhuti Jha. And of course, we are going to see them, but these are their pictures. This is Tulsi. Mr. Tawari is a creative entrepreneur and knowledge strategist. He has written a number of books. I'm not going to give a very detailed introduction because when you registered, you viewed everything. He has a master's in chemical engineering from Illinois Institute of Technology in Chicago from 1980. He has written a number of books. After graduation in engineering in 1978 from India, he completed MS in chemical engineering from Illinois Institute of Technology. He has worked in field of energy research, and he is engaged in original research on economic and social issues, offering practical solutions. He has designed policy blueprints for two national wealth creation propositions, reversal of migration through rural entrepreneurship and redesigning cities enveloped within villages under one. Our second panelist is Dr. Sat Parashar. He holds a PhD in finance. He was former director of IIM, Indian Institute of Management in Indore. He is currently based in Arizona in USA. He has number of faculty appointments as well as administrative appointments. I'm not going to read the whole list because again, I want to save on time and I want to give the time to our panelists and keep some time extra for the discussion. He's a prolific writer. He's an invited speaker in various professional forums. He has been highly commended for his lecture on Bhagavad Gita for strategic leadership. He's a guest columnist at Arizona Republic, a publication of USA Today Group. He has also been publishing at creately.in, the indianfreepress.com. He has authored many books, research papers, case studies, etc. So that is Dr. Parashar. And our last panelist is Dr. Vibhuti Jha. He's a dear friend. He's a principal at Ashcroft, Sullivan and Jha. He holds a PhD in rural development economics. Very nice. He's also a media personality. He runs the USA edition of Jaipur Dialogue. His specialties include business development, corporate governance, leadership, marketing, negotiations, public relations, credit and risk analysis, etc., etc. A little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. It imparts education in the field of international relations. It fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. It aims to contribute towards world peace and prosperity and condemns terrorism in all forms worldwide. We have a monthly roundtable discussion on second Monday of each month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and that is what we are having today. We organize a monthly guest lecture by a domain expert. We also organize symposia, meetings, and conferences, and we promote publications of articles on geopolitics and related subjects. Before I invite our speakers, I'm going to start with a famous quotation by a famous politician of 20th century, William Jefferson Clinton. And the quote is, "It is the economy's stew." And that election slogan is still very, very important, not just in United States, but everywhere else. I'm going to go to another quote by another politician, and that politician's name is Deng Xiaoping. And the quote is, to be rich is to be glorious. Mind you, this is a communist guy saying, to be rich is glorious. So you have two different frameworks. United States, the mecca of capitalism, and communist China, which believes in socialism with Chinese characteristics. And both of them are saying that, economy and economic aspects and to be rich is very important. So I bring the third politician and economist. His name was Vishnu Gupta or Kautilya, who wrote Arthashastra. So what does Chanakya or Kautilya say? Yastyarthastasya mitrani, yastyarthasya tasya bandhava, yastyarthah sa loke, yastyarthah cha pandita. The one who has money has all the friends. The one who has money has people who want to be his brothers and is appreciated by everyone. And that's the real Pandit or expert. So that's the value of money Chanakya is talking about. Chanakya is also famous for Arthashastra, and I'm going to have a couple of quotes from Arthashastra. This science of wealth creation brings into being and preserves spiritual good, material well-being and pleasures, and destroys spiritual evil, material loss and hatred. Here Chanakya is talking about wealth creation for a nation. And lastly, he writes, be ever active in management of the economy because the root of wealth is economic activity. Inactivity brings material distress. Without an active policy, both current prosperity and future gains are destroyed. And these are the injunctions to the king or the ruler of a country. So we see that whether it is US, whether it is communist China, and whether that is India of ancient time during Maurya Empire, the fundamentals have remained the same. There is no shortcut to wealth creation or the prosperity of a nation. So with that introduction, I'm going to invite our first panelist, which is Mr. Tulsi Tauri. Sir, the floor is yours. You may kindly share your PowerPoint and go ahead. Tulsi Tauri.
Thank you, Adityanji, for this invitation in august company of Dr. Parashar and Dr. Jha. The importance of economy, as you mentioned by Chanakya. So, as we go further into the subject of today's time, let me the slide show on. Thomas Piketty's work has been known to most of you. Widening disparity and concentration of capital are the two most important elements of economy, the way world is experiencing. The data here is shown about USA, but this concentration of capital is applicable to every nation in the world because all nations are working on the similar principles that were started from after World War II. So why this concentration of capital is the real question. Because in my view, sanctity of money is lost. And by that I mean the transfer of wealth, which we will look into, dominates the real creation of wealth. The creation of wealth activity is about actually value addition. When people come together, exchange values with each other, they make happy one and another, and the process of money helps. So the money grows and capital grows, and that is creation of wealth. So value addition and money should have a positive relationship, and that is creation of wealth, and that is GDP. But I'm referring here positive GDP. Why? Because there is another element when the value depletion takes place and people grow money. How does that happen? When one person acquires money and the society loses or the nature loses, is the value depletion. But in GDP, it is counted as positive only. So the negative GDP, which is the result of transfer of wealth, which actually is a suction of money from the wealth created by creation of wealth into people who are really not contributing any value. And so the sanctity of money is lost. Money is acquired only through value addition is the real money. So GDP that you see quantitative 5 plus 5, 10%, actually GDP quality becomes 5 minus 5, 0. That is a tragedy. There are several examples here. One example I mentioned here is about currency trade. Today, $1,500 trillion is the currency trade, whereas the world GDP is $140 trillion. So you can see where the money is really going, whether in COW or in TOW. Now, in Indian context, domestic purpose, I define 5 strategic reforms. Number 1 has to do with entrepreneurs. India is a unique country. 80+ % people are not employed. They are on their own in one way or other. Whereas in country like USA, 80% people are actually in employment. 5 key parameters are missed out, and that is where attention needs to go. First is monetary reform, that is banking reform regarding creation of wealth and transfer of wealth measurement in the balance sheet itself. Second is a cluster pioneering entrepreneurs. What do I mean by that? India's backbone is small, medium entrepreneurs. If you go into any city of India, Rajkot, Ludhiana, Salem, Shivakasi, you will find a cluster of number of hundreds and thousands of entrepreneurs working together towards one specific product domain. How does that happen? Because one fine day, a pioneering entrepreneur, one person entered that city and started a unique activity, and over a period of time, number of entrepreneurs gathered and it started becoming a cluster. It is not properly identified, it requires to be empowered. So cluster pioneering entrepreneur is the key element of entrepreneurs. Exponential tech entrepreneurs. Now, knowledge people in India have been known to be in brain drain. Why? Because the opportunity for knowledge entrepreneurs are actually diminished in India in past 70 years. Some changes have begun to happen, but a lot has to happen. Why is it so important? Because knowledge entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur provide the exponential growth in economy. Before internet, you were to write a few postcards, and today you can write millions. The whole society at one stroke advances from one level to another. That is the result of exponential work of tech entrepreneurs. And cross-nation value chains in the era of internet revolution is the way to go. And decentralized rural entrepreneurs. Rural economy is the most neglected aspect of Indian economy. Two-thirds people live in rural areas, yet majority of the wealth, knowledge, and every kind of activity is concentrated in handful cities. The goal should be one new entrepreneur every year in every village. Just imagine if we can create 7 lakh Shubh Labh I'll go into that. Rural entrepreneurs every year, the wasted time of humanity will be saved and wealth will be created. And finally, regarding entrepreneurial, the major reform which is required is the banking sector has to work as entrepreneurial bankers. I'm sorry to say that probably the banking has lost its real strength in India today, in the sense of that they don't understand opportunities, they don't understand initiatives of entrepreneurs, they don't recognize any of the entrepreneurs mentioned above. And entrepreneurial bankers are required with a special attitudinal focus. The second correction is IAS and government officials working as wealth creative facilitation administrator. Pay them salary and link bonuses with their revenue growth from entrepreneurs. Third is a decentralized governance through empowering societal institutions so that the government is smaller, lower taxations are there, trusted communities are created, social fabric is strengthened. Fourth correction, in my view, is I call it LSM umbrella, large, small, medium, as one legal team to participate for defense, infrastructure, etc. Otherwise, one large organization controls all the major projects, and small and medium enterprises are actually working as a bonded laborer. So they need to function as one legal team while participating. Now, finally, the PPP is really not taken off in India in a big way. Why? Because the honest government officers are afraid of dealing with private entrepreneurs. So conflict resolution for them is a need for our. Now, India reforms in sustainability point of view. I think there are two areas. First is lifestyle disruption that has to do with decentralized human habitats. You know, Bombay, Delhi, we have 30,000 people per square kilometer, and look at 50% population living in slums. There is a need, whereas you go 1 hour outside of Bombay or Delhi, you find 300 people per square kilometer. 90% of geography is available but not properly harnessed. Under one master plan, a small city of 10 kilometers surrounded by 100 to 200 villages under one master plan is the need of our. This one can watch in my film Life 2.0, 15 minute on YouTube. Per capita CO2 emission, we all know for USA is 13.68 to India 1.74. When you break that 1.74, villages portion will be far, far, far lesser. And that is where the lifestyle disruption can be combined with the city people. The second one in sustainability, we need to incentivize creative activities over material consumption. You know, I have this data, but I'll read only one piece from here. In the mobility, the transportation, 17 tons to 2 tons is the challenge, reduction of 88%, as some scientists have found the data. 88% reduction in transport if we want to go the way of sustainability. So we need to think as to how to reduce material consumption. And the other sustainability disruption I talked about was instead of material consumption, go towards creative activities where minimal materials are required. In the internet era, that is the greatest boon to mankind. And this can happen through two fundamental design parameters. Uh, One is the designing itself of any product where material is content is low and designing, which is intellectual work, is higher. And the second is propensity to create. Let people do more and more creative activities, whether national geography, exploration, research, sports, filmmaking. Creative human time is the real missed opportunity in my view. Most people are engaged in routine activities because they're struggling for survival. That is the real source of abundance of wealth and happiness. In the global context, five another strategic reforms. First one, of course, is the global monetary structure. You know, and three banking reforms are necessary. First is sanctity of money preserved. I mentioned it already, creation of wealth versus transfer of wealth. Declare currency trade illegal. You know, wow, $1,500 trillion currency trade per year as against $140 trillion of GDP. This all wealth destructive speculative activities need to be curbed. And floating rate is linked with the speculative market. So the dynamic bilateral and multilateral fixation of exchange rates is the need of the hour. Emphasis on decentralizing technologies. So let no one become too big, because incentives should go to entrepreneurs to decentralize. Instead of one Amazon, there can be hundreds of decentralized Amazons with lifestyle disruption that I talked about. Collaborative leadership in trade and cultural partnerships. This is very crucial when we see our Prime Minister going around smaller countries joining hands with India. That is the concept, that earn goodwill through collaborative competition instead of power of muscles as capital and weaponry. So every nation matters, no matter how small it is. And fourth is that, with all the growth, sorry, with all the growth in technology and science, still we are a country, we are a world of muscles. जिसकी लाठी उसकी भैंस. Earlier it was sword, today it is nuclear bomb. But shastra versus shastra. Now, high time in internet revolution that leadership rises, that disputes are resolved through debates, genuine debates. Yet we be ready for wars, because dharma yuddha cannot be avoided. And finally, global harmony. Moral political leadership needs to be institutionalized, needs to be decentralized, because if this one factor is missing, the world is going to go haywire. These are the future domains which India has for great opportunities. I'm not going to read them. You can take a quick look right now.
So,
In conclusion, I just want to say three things have gone wrong at fundamental level. Centralization of capital power, that desire to control over desire to create, and economic growth is focused, whereas actually mind growth driven economic growth is the need of the humankind. And that can happen through decentralization. The intellectual corruption has increased only due to centralization. So through decentralization, that again can be minimized. And finally, one major confusion has been money as a goal instead of means to greater wealth. So there are parameters like identity, excellence within, satisfaction, family and love, societal coexistence, sustainability of nature that cannot be measured in terms of money. Money is like wheels for a car, not a garland to be worn. Human nature is both positives and negatives. For all people, it needs larger goals to rise beyond pettiness. Like an Olympic medal winner is owned by all nations. Decentralized economic structure can ensure creative aspiration for majority. And this is the final slide. I am just depicting that the society economy is like a train. Most people are connected, interconnected as wagons. And the people who drive this train of economy are entrepreneurs. But there are two kinds of entrepreneurs. One is a creation of wealth entrepreneur, as I show on the left. Second is a transfer of wealth entrepreneur on the right, and both are pulling the society into opposite directions. And in second case, the wealth is destroyed for majority. Survival for masses is a struggle like today. Last 40 years, even America, Japan, Europe is a negative. Whereas in the left side is the creation of wealth. The empowerment of entrepreneurs, the creation of wealth entrepreneurs is the need of the hour. Thank you. I believe for any nation to succeed, no other nation has to suffer. And it's not only about independence, Statue of Liberty anymore. It's also about collective hands coming together as a community. Thank you very much.
thank you, Tulsi ji, for very interesting and very thought-provoking ideas that you have, discussed with us. I'm pretty sure there will be a lot of questions. We will defer to the questions to the end of the program. We do want to hear from our all three great panelists who have their own take on this particular issue. So I would invite our second panelist, Dr. Sat Parashar, to give his presentation. Dr. Sat Parashar, we can't hear you, sir. I think his audio situation is still not resolved. We can't hear you, Dr. Parashar.
He's on mute actually.
Ask him to unmute.
Yeah, he's mute.
Well, you can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, we can.
Beautiful. And can you see my slide?
Yes, we can see your slides.
Beautiful. Thank you. I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Well, I'm going to talk about the banking reform, and I will be sharing a few strategic thoughts. I will focus only on 5 points. One, what is the importance of banking in any economy, including India? What is the structure of banking in India? What is the situation of non-performing assets, particularly of the public sector banks? And what is the real issue? Is it NPA or there is some other issue? And the lastly, I'll touch upon a time-tested and trusted solution to regulating the banking. When we talk about the role of banking in any economy, all of you know it. Maybe I am giving a context. Let me say that money moves the economy. My previous speaker, he had started with the monetary and the banking reform as a key reform. I'm elaborating on that because when you think about the GDP of a country, how it is calculated is the sum total of 4 things. C is the consumption expenditure, I is the private investment expenditure, G is the government expenditure, and net export is the 4th component. In a country like the US, consumption constitutes about 2/3 of the total GDP. America is great, US is great because they consume a lot. Now, my analysis have shown that there is a positive correlation between domestic credit and GDP, inflation, and employment. Meaning, when there is more credit, you will see growth, you will see higher inflation, and you will see lower unemployment or say higher employment. Another analysis which I did shows that there is a positive correlation between M2. M2 is a measure of money supply. In economics, there are different measures of money supply. Currency is a very small component. The bank deposits are a major component. And in economics, we measure M1, M2, M3. M2 is a policy-oriented measure, and research has shown that there is a positive correlation between M2, GDP, inflation, and employment. What you see from this discussion so far is that these two variables, that the domestic credit and M2, they move the economy. They can pull an economy up and they can pull an economy down. In fact, some time back, I had published one article. The title was, for India to move up from number 3. Here is the clue. In that article, I have highlighted that in terms of purchasing power parity, America is number 2 economy of the world today. It's the China, which is number 1 economy of the world, and India is number 3. Now, when I applied my analysis, I arrived at a conclusion that India can do something to really match up with this number 2 and number 1. There is a gap and hole, and that gap and hole is credit creation. Now, my study has the country has to go up at a higher rate of growth. We need to inject more credit in the economy. But what is banking structure in India? I was picking up a few numbers. The public sector bank, I'm talking of 2021. Public sector banks are 12 in that country as of today. Foreign banks are 41. Private sector banks are 22. There are small bank institutions and regional banks. When we put all that together, India has 131 banks. Now, when the year-on-year credit growth, you will find that a characteristic difference between the 3 segments of the banking. Public sector banks grew in 2021 over 2020 by 3.1%. Foreign banks 4.3%, and private sector banks grew 10.1%. When you talk about the deposits, about 9.9 trillion is the deposits that the public sector had. Foreign banks could have 0.68 and private sector could have $4.8 trillion. In terms of advances which is being made by them, it is public sector banks made about $6.34 trillion, rupees. Foreign banks made 0.43 trillion rupees and private sector banks made 3.94. Now, one column which I have added here is the NNPA. NNPA is net non-performing assets. This number for public sector banks in 2021 was 3.9%, foreign banks was 0.49%, and for private sector banks it was 1.42%. The last row which I have put is SBI Group. SBI Group is included in the public sector banks, but SBI by itself is actually the elephant in the room. You will see that of the total deposit with the public sector banks had 9.9 trillion rupees, SBI Group had 3.68. Without going further into these numbers, I would say approximately 30 to 40% of the public sector banking is in the hand of SBI Group. I like to make one comment with these numbers, and that is that this NNPA, which I have just quoted for you, I said it conceals more and reveals less. It's a trick being played on the general public to look good. Our banks are not good. But this is the trick they play on the general public, and everyone, government, finance minister, Reserve Bank governor, all are part of it. What they're saying is that the net non-performing assets of the public sector banks were 3.9%. But if we read the FSR is Financial Stability Report, it says that it is in the vicinity of 9.5%. And they're expecting it to go by 2022 by another 0.5%. So it may be in the vicinity of 10%. So when we look at the non-performing, now by the way, what is the non-performing assets? You know it very well. These are the loans which are either defaulted or likely to default. So from structure, I think you get a sense that what are the major segments and what is the major issue. Now, the issue which I like to point out is that most of the studies say that the real issue is NPA. I don't agree. I have written a paper about it. I wrote an open letter to the Finance Minister, Government of India. I said that the problem of PSB is NPP and not NPA. Is non-performing assets? No. It's the non-performing people. You know, when you go to borrow from the bank very nicely says that the man behind the project is more important than the project. Same is true to the banks. More important than these kind of variables which we read in the newspaper and in the RBI reports and in the Indian Banking Association report, we got to accept that this is at the surface. NPA is at the surface. We have a fundamental problem, and that fundamental problem is bad management control system. We are not able to manage our people well. So, solution. Based on my 50 years of work across the globe, I will say that the time-tested and trusted solution is responsibility accounting. Indeed, after working for these 50 years, I have developed myself a 10-element model of high-performing organization. Those of you who understand Hindi, for them I will say that I have a small couplet. I normally say, मैं उन्हें जीने के अंदाज सिखा सकता हूँ, वो मुझसे पूछ के मरते क्यों नहीं मरने वाले. I have worked with a number of organizations in the private sector. I have worked even in the public sector, and I have helped them turn around. Over years, we have the wisdom. How any organization can be highly performing, I know there are 10 elements. But who cares in the government of India? Well, I'm thankful to you for this opportunity. At least there are some right-minded people in US under the leadership of Dr. Aditya who meet time to time and take up these questions. I'm grateful to you for getting me this opportunity to speak to you. I stop it here. If there be any question, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Sat Parashar. It was really a very fascinating talk when you distinguished between NPA and NPP. And, you know, listening to you over the last 10 minutes, I'm thoroughly convinced that India has problem of NPP, you know, whether it is Vijay Mallya or any other person who has taken loans from the public sector banks, and instead of managing those, they just, you know, squandered the money and ran abroad. So yes, there is definitely a problem of NPP, and I take your point very seriously. It's a very, very important issue. Before we go on to discussion, I would like our third panelist and a dear friend, Dr. Vibhuti Jha. He will also be talking about, he's a banker and financier. So Vibhuti ji, your turn to take the floor.
Thank you very much. I hope everybody is able to hear me. And if you are not able to hear me, then it's your problem, not mine, because my mic is working. So Adityanji, your laughter and your smile gives me the concurrence. Now, I definitely want to thank you, not at the end, but at the beginning of the session today, that it's a very vital, vital conversation to have. Is the economy stupid? Arthashastra said that those who have money, they have wisdom, they have friends, they have lovers, and they have brothers, all of them together. Important part is the carrier of money is the banking sector. And as a banker, you know, I have had the privilege of interacting at various levels of the community directly. So I'm not bringing you theoretical knowledge. What Satpalji showed you in the data and what Tulsiji showed in his wisdom as the things to do, I'm only corroborating to that. And I have, in this next 10 minutes or less perhaps, I would only say that I have had the first-hand experience of dealing with NPA, non-performing assets. And Parasharji is right to say that it is non-performing people. But why does that happen? The people in banks are not stupid. I was not. And I don't agree that people are stupid. But the systems and the processes makes you lethargic, and the culture of accountability disappears, in particularly in public sector banks. Now, I worked with Reserve Bank of India on the one spectrum of the banking scenario, control, compliance. And I also worked with a foreign bank, American Express, in corporate banking, private banking, where all that mattered was performance. Don't perform, you're out. So the reason why the foreign banks had the lowest number of percentage of debt, non-performing debt, was and I encountered that, a classic case of in Delhi, I was handed over the responsibility to adjust the entire Sylvania Lakshman portfolio of 35 lakhs of overdraft account, which was sitting idle. They were paying interest every month. So we recognized that it was a dead asset. It was a dead asset in the sense that you had to, it was not fetching anything. There was no movement in the account. But the story short, we successfully negotiated for another bank which was asset deficient, had a lot of liabilities. We persuaded that bank to obtain this asset, which had been not a defaulter, but it was a static one. For us, it was not value for money. And we created the account in such a way that it went away from us. The important part which I want to drive at is the non-performing assets do not happen because companies want to go bankrupt. This is a very important part to understand. Companies go belly up not because of their own considerations, unless and otherwise they are what is known as willful defaulters, like the Modi who did that with diamond industry, and there are many examples of that. Or Vijay Mallya was one such example. So Vijay Mallya is a classic example. I sent him a letter. I still have it on my computer. Maybe I'll share it with you sometime. I had told him, the way you are running your Kingfisher Airlines, you won't be alive for a long time. He sent his chief quality control guy to me in Bombay, figure out what was I talking about. And he got convinced, but he fell into his ego trap. If he had followed our advice, Kingfisher would have survived in a different way. But the banking sector, and I prepared a little bit of a note on the NPA thing, non-performing asset. The first time I heard about non-performing asset was when I was a young officer in RBI in Bangalore. It's a very important pointer to the fact. I have lived through that saga. I was a young officer in training in RBI in Bangalore in an evening get-together at somebody's house. A Deccan Herald, which was the local paper of Bangalore, a representative came, you work for RBI? I said, yes. Can you give me Canara Bank's inspection report? Which the RBI. So I laughed. I said, I admire your courage to ask me for the report, not knowing perhaps that I can't give you the report. Even if I had access to, and I'm a trainee, I know nothing. But I said, why do you want it? 1978 or 79, that's the time when I'm telling you the story. This man tells me, sir, the story is that Canara Bank has lots of assets, loans out there. They're only accruing interests and they will never get their money back. He did not use the word non-performing asset because that phrase was not coined by that time. But he did say that this loan will never be paid back to the bank. The bank is only window dressing it. I said, sorry, I can't help you about that. Fast forward, I see this story shaping up in the Indian banks, and particularly in public sector undertakings, public sector banks. And what is happening is that there have been tremendous change has happened and the scrutiny in the last few years. The global financial meltdown has driven a host of reforms and a new regulatory climate around the world. As a result, banking institutions find the need to look beyond precedent to understand historical breakdowns in their operations. We all know that. Suddenly, money dried up in India. after Prime Minister Modi imposed tough conditions, recover or do something about it. But that's the issue that I'm addressing here. Specifically, one of the most critical areas to analyze will be how to manage NPAs within their portfolio. The correlation between the money lending practices of banks and NPAs has been well established. While the specific industries and geographic regions contribute to the volatility of the lending market, most research studies indicate a default rate of 2 to 4% among loans processed globally. It's not an Indian phenomenon alone, it's global. Three specific actions can be critical to mitigating against the number of NPAs as well as the degree and impact on non-performance. One is the internal systems and processes of assessing and managing loans to minimize the occurrence of NPAs. That's very, very critical. I have personally spoken to the chairman of IBA, who was my peer group, who was chairman of a particular bank which had the highest number of NPAs in account books. He was chairman of IBA. I was sitting in his IBA office and I said, Mr. X, kuch karo ya. He said, you come and give an address to IBA leadership where all the chairman of banks would be here and you can give a talk. If anybody is interested, they will pick you up. I said, you should be ashamed of yourself. Because your former bank, of which you were the chairman, has the highest percentage of NPAs. All I want is to give me your 2 branches and give me 3 NPAs which did not deserve to be NPAs. That can be turned around. And I'll turn it around because we work a lot in the turnaround strategy field. Did not do anything. The second one was the underlying organizational cultures. Both of you referred to that, where a lack of accountability that enables many NPAs is most often the norm. We all know about the State Bank of India and others, the 2% manager. Every loan had a 2% kickback. Who cared for the viability of the project? Satpalji is laughing, which is my silent endorsement to my statement. He knows it. The point which I'm trying to make is that, I believe in Einstein's quotation that any intelligent fool can complicate a simple problem. It takes courage to move in the other direction. Solving the problem is key. The third, the support given to companies to get them performing to the point where they can be responsible for their obligations and thus move out of the category of being an NPA. This is very important. As I said earlier on, in my experience of dealing with loan portfolios, nobody wants to fail deliberately. We had 9 of us or 10 of us here just now. By a voice vote, please do tell, is there anyone here who wants to fail by choice, by his desire? The answer would be an unequivocal no. We don't want to fail. But each one of us are operating within our own constraints and circumstances. Somebody does very well, somebody doesn't do very well. In this very America or in this very India, there are billionaires galore. There are millionaires galore, and there are poor people as well. Call it a karmic influence as you want to be. But the important part here is that when companies get into trouble, environmental constraints beyond their control, government policy changes, that's the time the companies need help. We have a structure to provide them that vital information and access to information and access to redressal of the challenges. In most banks, there are a separate set of practices and processes that lead to the granting of a loan. Regardless of any particular bank and their individual terminology, the basic elements are universal globally. And they are loan origination, that is application, evaluation, project appraisal, approval, sanction, documentation, disbursal, repayment, monitoring, closure. This is the cycle. The moment there is a failure in any one side of this, you have a system collapse. That's what happens in the banks. What is happening in companies yet another. But what happens within the banks is कहीं पे कोई भी lazy हो जाता है. अरे जाने भी दो यारो, हो जाएगा यार, की फर्क पैदा. You know, पंजाबी का जो बड़ा अच्छा शब्द है. Don't worry, it will happen. The point which I'm trying to make here is that, you know, what is required is to improve the internal systems and better assess and manage their loan portfolios. That's very important. Shift organizational cultures to a more accountability-based norm. That's what Parashar also was referring to. Accountability is key. I'm a loan manager. I got transferred. That loan portfolio goes over to Adityanji. Adityanji doesn't care. मैं तो वहाँ था नहीं, झाजी थे. अब आदित्यजी चले गए तो पता चला सतपाल जी आ गए. Nobody's baby it is. Unless and until we know how to fix the responsibility, accountability will not come. And the third element is provide value added. And if need be, billable support in the form of consultants and coaches to businesses before they fail, so as to avoid the breakdowns of the NPAs in the first place. Now, I had submitted, believe it or not, I'm reading out to you my note that I submitted to Reserve Bank of India. I read the provision, the relevant para. There are 2 more pages to this. Of all people, Professor Rangarajan quoted from my note in one of his NPA addresses, but did nothing. RBI did nothing. IBA did nothing. I even addressed an issue called understanding the efficiency and effectiveness. I'm a banker. For us, we always lent other people's money. It was not my own money. No bank has its own money. It is other people's money, right? So we were always cautious about how to find the ways and means to ensure that our loans were paid back. We had a very low NPA rate, virtually negligible, because we were smart about it. And what we did was we used to teach our clients about 3 very vital elements of capital. We defined it. Capital is not only money. That is the normal understanding. But what do we say often when we talk about companies and corporations? Our human resources. Do we ever pay any attention to that? Never. So we identified capital, and somebody mentioned, whether I don't know whether it was Tawariji or Satpalji, that who you give money to is the person behind the enterprise, who is running the show. So we defined capital in 3 clear structures. One was identity capital. Identity capital was, if Adityanji has brought this project, it has to have some merit. Let's help him. Let's guide him. Let's support him. Your name is your currency. Your name is your capital. That's your identity. Today, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and everybody have their own identity capital. So much so that even Twitter is advising them to dilute 10% of his equity. Then you have a thing called symbolic capital. Is the brand, your people. Your brand, your people. That is symbolic capital. They are all interrelated. Finally, is the pragmatic capital. The pragmatic capital is your IP, intellectual property, your product, your innovation, your research, and your hardcore engineers and scientists who are working in that company to make this happen. One important person leaving changes the fortune of that company. So we have done enormous work in our turnaround strategies. By improving the identity capital, companies have gotten $20 to $100 million worth of money. Because when you improve your identity, you improve your symbolic capital, you improve your pragmatic capital, it has a tripling effect and then a multiplier effect. I would stop here. I would leave the thing to question, but my experience, I take my experience beyond academic norms, beyond bureaucracy. Satpalji is an academician and a professor. Tawariji is a genius of in his own way, and I bring from a hardcore banking experience on the street what I have seen in the battlefield of finance and corporate finance and investments. So I have a lot more to say on this topic. I can speak for 2 more hours, but I think thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much indeed, Vibhuti. It is so fascinating to have three different perspectives on the same topic with people with three different backgrounds. Before I open it for questions, I have actually questions to all three of you, questions slash comments. I'll start with Tiwariji. Tiwariji, you did say that in US 80% of the people are employed, whereas in India 80% of the people are on their own. Actually, statistics are very, very different. In a presidential contest, Mitt Romney stated, I think that was in 2012, that 47% of the people in United States do not pay any taxes. They are on some kind of welfare. And that was in 2012. Actually, US economy is run by very few people. There are a lot of people who are getting negative money without doing anything productive. So it is again an instance of political corruption where taxpayers' money is being, transferred down in various schemes. So probably, US is not really an ideal as far as that is concerned. That was a comment, but I do have a question for you. You did mention about, making village-based Shubh Labh industries, which are focused on one particular product. And that's a very enticing idea. But if you look at it, there are already examples of it in certain parts in India. So I will mention Tirupur in Tamil Nadu. Village of Tirupur has a very, very, sort of complex supply chain system, and they produce clothes. You have Shivakashi. There is firecracker industry, which our Supreme Court just killed. And then you have example of Ludhiana, which, is top notch in, woolen products, hosiery products and things like that. So there are already examples on the ground that if you build a local ecosystem and just focus on one product, it becomes your trademark. Issue is how to replicate it at multiple sites. And again, your concept of, involving everyone in, in prosperity and all, and having no, competition or mercantile interests. Somewhat more philosophical, because when you look at the nation states, it's the mercantile interests that dominate the nation states. So at a society level, within a country, you can foster that. But when it comes to international competition, all this becomes hogwash. So I am seeking suggestions from you. What could be done in Tirupur? What could be done in Shivakashi? What could be done in Ludhiana? Why cannot be done in Darbhanga?
Adityanji, let me respond to this point, which actually you are corroborating only as to what I said.
Yeah.
Because the clusters, pioneers, is the reason that clusters exist. And cluster pioneer is a one person, mind you. You go to Rajkot, you go to Ludhiana, you go to Shivakasi. One fine day, one pioneering entrepreneur walked when there was no firecrackers, no hosiery. And it is happening naturally because the Indians traditionally are entrepreneurial traits. And over a period of time, because of their large-heartedness and their transparency, and they're not wanting to be a sole owner of a particular industry or so, gradually uneducated, illiterate entrepreneurs also come along, and that is how all these clusters are built. How many bankers understand what does a pioneering entrepreneur mean? Is my question. The day a banker will understand, looking at 100 people and finding out who is the pioneering entrepreneur, you have replication in every village area of India. Because entrepreneur on his own cannot always succeed. Out of 10, one succeeds. Look at JRD Tata could not succeed in airline because somebody took his airline away. So, you know what I mean? There is a entrepreneurs are killed in the womb at the nurturing stage. It is the banker's responsibility to come forward and make sure that more number of entrepreneurs are understood in time, timely, and that too Shubh Labh entrepreneur, because Shubh Labh means that the guy is going to facilitate others to become entrepreneurs. So it's like saying the guy who has 100 rupees should be collaborating with 10 rupees. The guy who has the 10 rupees should be collaborating with the 1 rupee. And that is the kind of river of entrepreneurship which India is capable of and has demonstrated. Now, replication does not automatically happen. Ecosystem is required. Banking entrepreneur, professionally educated people taking interest in now future, in the food sector itself, there is a huge opportunity for rural India in nutrition, in herbal products. But do you think that some ordinary young person in a rural area can be able to do this kind of a trade and send overseas? Let me give one example. Athani is a place in Karnataka. You're saying that competition on the international level, we have all heard of Kolhapur chappals.
Yeah.
The shoes made from Athani right now are selling for $400 in Hollywood. And these are made in cottage industries, mind you. Why it happened? There was a missing element. One noble entrepreneur, Madhura Chhatrapati, she is my dear friend based in Bangalore, about 75 years old now. She decided to make an intervention and create a collaborative entrepreneurship model. So it's not cooperative model. Every individual is entrepreneur in home, and the whole thing is digitized, and the payments are coming to them from overseas through digital means way before digitalization has happened 10 years. So the rural entrepreneurs are aware of what can do what they can do. There are missing element of professional intervention from structure and marketing and all that, and that needs to be brought together, which is the role of actually entrepreneurial banker. I hope I have replied to your question.
Actually, you have done very well, and from that I'll take segue to Dr. Sat Parashar.
Excuse me, can I add something to what Mr. Tulsi is saying?
Okay, go ahead,
Can-
but keep it brief.
Yeah, okay. I am from the field of agriculture. I am a retired scientist from BRC. And see, some of my experience are like, see, the problem is some of the times, we don't have proper technologies. The technologies are developed by the institutions, which are only for the sake of, getting some, rewards, for the people who are, holding higher positions, but they are of no use at the ground level. One example I quote is the tomato issue here. In India, you know that every year so much tomatoes are produced, they are simply thrown. Like potatoes are also, sometimes they are simply left to rot, in the fields, or, they are simply dumped because they don't get not more than 1 rupee per kilo. So in South, there is one horticulture research institute which they came out with a portable, rather not a portable, it's a mobile truck based, ketchup preparation unit, and all these other things like tomato juice and many things. They, on paper they look, excellent. Then I started actually analyzing it, and then I also seen some videos and all that. Finally, what happens is it costs about 45 lakhs. Okay, and the person who operates it, at the end of it, after deducting all the expenditure, he makes something like 300 rupees per day. I mean, it comes about 10,000 rupees per month for a person after working, 30 days. This is the kind of wrong technologies that we have. We were unable to really deliver proper technologies for, rural setup. And most of the industries, most of them are high capital intensive. And as a nation, we have, we did not provide technologies that are suitable, in villages at a low cost technologies. I think that is the main problem. And the other thing is, also networking. See, for example, today I want to start something with my entire, my background with PhD and everything. If I want to start any particular thing, where do you get proper information? You go to any government offices, they are the last ones to give any proper information. In marketing federations, they have heavily failed. And even technology transfer useless. I have seen the technology transfers. People come, take, say, for example, BRC's technology, show it to the bank, take some 45 lakhs, kind of, grant, and then they go to one third grade, university, and then they show that, they are tied up with the university,
Thank you,
and
Dr.
they are going to
Until my
incubate.
point, I need to move on. So
Okay, carry.
I'm going to ask a question to Dr. Parashar, and I'm taking actually a segue or a tangent from Tulsiji's point. And the point I'm going to ask you is that you said that, in a country like India, we need to inject credit. And Tulsiji is saying, where are the bankers that are going to give credit in this kind of situation at a micro level? As far as I know, there was a Grameen Bank in Bangladesh started by Muhammad Yunus, Nobel laureate. And the concept was to give micro credit to women to create small level entrepreneurs in the rural sector. Now, I don't see that kind of model being replicated in India. Why? Why it has not been done? The concept of injecting microcredit in the communities, especially to women who are sometimes more responsible with money than the men at that level. Do you have any comments on that?
A lot of comments because while talking to you today, I'm constantly reminded of my 25 years talking only this subject. And maybe it's an occasion or not an occasion. My friend Vibhuti ji, I was only 50-year-old when I was offered the general manager position in Dubai in a bank, and I refused it. I have been on the board of at least 10 top banks across the world. So don't count us that we only read somebody's book and we are professor. For 25 years, at least 100,000 bankers have walked into my classroom. And I challenge them. Let me give the situation. You want to give your money to your brother, 99% of the chances you will say, hey boy, I am giving you money which I borrowed from my friend. You have to pay me back. You try to protect that money. When you think of a bank, you said the other's money. We are having our livelihood by the trust that is given to us. Bankers have to understand it's the poor man's money. Now, coming to the specific question which Aditya brought with regard to what is called the micro, let me tell you, you'll be amazed to know that the banking architecture of India is better than anybody else in terms of quantity. Problem is quality, problem is dishonesty. I am in constant touch with the executive directors of the banks who write their papers today after retirement because during their working age they cannot write those papers. And they send those papers to me for my opinion. And the other day I had a tiff with one of the executive director of one of the top development bank of the country. In banking, we say there are two risks. One is called adverse selection and second is called moral hazard. Moral hazard means people take the money for a purpose and use it for another purpose. There is a moral hazard. Bankers have that difficulty. The other is called adverse selection. That means the bankers give the money to a person whom it should not have been given. I have not 100, 1,000 paper by bankers who always say, situation is like that. These are the difficulties. These are the policy issues. These are the moral hazard. And I wrote a mail to him the other day that for God's sake, now you are retired, have the courage to say that it was adverse selection, not moral hazard. So when you are talking about these micro, architecture is there. Lot of people are there. There are small business banks. They are there. But the whole problem is the honesty. I have worked in the public sector for most of my life, let me tell you. And at the end of my about say 55 year of career, I say what is needed is in the public sector, don't lose hope. Well, my father also used to talk me, don't lose hope, but my hope is different than the hope of my father. My hope is all in caps. Hope is for honesty of purpose and execution. I have found in my homeland that hope is missing, that honesty of purpose and execution is missing. I give you one example and then close it. You go to the website of the Reserve Bank of India and Federal Reserve here in US. You will be surprised to see the quality difference in terms of the data and information which is available. Technologically, India is not behind. But you will see the narrative which is put in the report of the Federal Reserve is qualitatively different, highly qualitatively different than what you get in the Reserve Bank. If you recall my slide, where from did I get those numbers which I have shared with you? Believe you me, not from RBI website. That I got from Indian Bankers Association. Now, how come Indian Bankers Association have the data and the RBI does not have? The problem is that RBI is not ready to be that transparent and easy reachable. When we talk about the information being not available, this is number one problem of that country. Well, I should not look like skeptic, but then this is what I have my personal experience of very many years.
Thank you, Dr. Parashar. I will come on to my friend Vibhuti ji, and I will take a segue from what Dr. Parashar said, that the problem is dishonesty. And I'll go back to 1969 when 14 banks were nationalized. Is the business of government to run the businesses or to run the banks, or to do just a facilitatory and regulatory role? So in 1969, we had nationalization of 14 banks. And you know, 1971, what happened? State Bank of India, Parliament Street branch, the banker gave 2 lakh rupees to a person by name Rustam Sohrab Nagarwala. And it is alleged that Nagarwala mimicked the voice of Indira Gandhi and said, for national interest, I need this 2 lakh rupees loan. But Nagarwala ran away with that money. Apparently, he called the banker by name Malhotra, and Malhotra gave money to Nagarwala, thinking that Indira Gandhi had called. We don't know who called whom. It's very unlikely that somebody could mimic the voice of Indira Gandhi. What happened to Nagarwala? He was in Tihar jail and he died there. So we are talking about dishonesty at a systemic level when private assets were nationalized and made public. Just like Tata Airlines was taken away by Government of India and made into Air India. So dishonesty comes from those who are ruling the country, and then dishonesty from top starts to percolate downwards. So we had massive injection of credit under a scheme called loan melas, mastered by Janardhan Pujari in Karnataka under Indira Gandhi, and massive amount of loans were given. In the community, they were all non-performing loans. They were never repaid, and apparently they went to the party, commissars. So that trend continued. So you had Vijay Mallya's and Nirav Modi's getting loans from bank on telephone call from the finance minister or instance of then prime minister, and that has come out in a London court. And the latest example of dishonesty is Chanda Kochar. So where do you go, Mr. Banker, when your whole system is rotten to the core? We can talk about all these divisions and, academic versus, professional banker. But when you have a system that is rotten to the core and it has been designed to fail, it has been designed to corrupt, how do you change the system that an honest citizen can become an entrepreneur with the help of injection of credit into the economy in an honest way? Vibhuti.
That's a brilliant challenge because you pointed out to the bleeding obvious of dishonesty in the world around us. Is America the most honest country in the world? Adityanji, you and I know. No. The answer is an emphatic no. Right? The question is, all these things are coexisting at any given point in time. In the US, all Satpalji, you and I know that if a cop stops us for a traffic violation, you won't get away with a ticket by paying him a $25 fee, will you? No. Never tried it also. Because he will give you another ticket for bribing a government official on duty. Correct? So in addition to your traffic violation. So the question is that how do you establish systems and processes? And I'm a great believer. I mean, about 10 years ago, I was on a consulting assignment with an investment banker in Bahrain. And at that time, I wrote an article which was published by a think tank. I'll send it to you to read it. Theme was very simple, that the technology will bring about certain amount of honesty in the way we do business. Because two things are happening with that. You can't hide anymore and you can't lie anymore.
Okay.
10 years ago, I could have told anybody I was somewhere else. Today, I can't because people in India, in Phoenix or wherever Satpalji is in Virginia, you in Michigan, Tiwari-ji in India, everybody knows that we are here today. It is on record. We can't hide anymore. There was a time when the politician used to say that I have been quoted out of context. Do you hear that anymore? You don't. The thing is very important here is that now, gradually, the political leadership, people may like or may not like Mr. Modi for any reason. But the one fact that has happened is that Ministry of Defense, Ministry of Industries, nobody has access to any journalist for anything. There is no corruption at the government level, at that level. Down at the lower levels, we do not know. But as you rightly said, it is top-down flow. So if the top stops, kahin na kahin to uska asar hoga na. That if you drop the water, it will take time to go down further. So there's something happening. But you are right about one thing. The frustration is big. The frustration is very big because corruption, just like anything else, has seeped into our blood now. As I was to be told in an international training facility in Switzerland, that in an otherwise dishonest world, if you emerge as an honest guy, you will go for a premium. Remember that. Because we all know that सब चोर हैं. अगर आप कहेंगे कि हम ईमानदार हैं तो लोग आप पे विश्वास नहीं करेंगे. लेकिन एक बार उनको विश्वास हो गया कि आप ईमानदार हैं, तो सब आपके पास आएंगे. I am a living example of that. I have done tremendous amount of business in India. I haven't till date paid a single penny in bribe to anyone. It all begins from here. And to be able to confront that with guts and courage. I'll tell you two incidents. This is very important for all when we talk about corruption. When the first ever time when the public-private participation haven't happened in the power sector, the power purchase agreements were being $100 million. Rule of thumb was $1 million per megawatt, right? There was an additional secretary. At that time, the single window clearance had not come about. So if you were getting foreign currency money, you had to go to the Ministry of External Affairs Economic Wing to get the loan. And this gentleman tells me, I need 3% upfront. I asked him, I said, do you have even a concept to understand what a 3% upfront mean? He had no concept. He said, I don't care. You know the story of Enron. Everybody was taking 7% from there, but God knows what were they doing with that, right? The point is that today it will not happen. It can't happen now. So there is a thing called corruption happening in the higher levels of bureaucracy where people are asking for money to do that. And the second part is also very important. When I was taking my NPA proposal to the banks, a broker called me late at night and saying that आपसे मिलना है. आप जो $1 million की प्रोजेक्ट की बात कर रहे हैं वो तो बहुत अच्छा है लेकिन किसी का कुछ बनता नहीं है. वो चेयरमैन साहब के पास चलिए, हम आपको 5-10 मिलियन की इनवॉइस बनवा देंगे. इतने सारे हो गए. This is the way I refuse those businesses. I told them to go to hell. The question is that when we compromise, today I can hold my head high. Nobody can say that this man is a carrier of money or he did a bogus business. Whether I took Dale Carnegie to India or any other businesses that I took to India, not a penny paid to anybody. It begins with us. So there is a dishonesty. See, listen, वो कौटिल्य का है कि किसका कहना है कि corruption is the honey on the tip of your tongue. You can't swallow it, you can't throw it. The temptation of money is so big. My bureaucrat friends have told me, Vibhuti, we don't have to be corrupt to take money. It comes. It is brought. My thing is something like this. You can eliminate corruption and dishonesty at lower levels when you bring about the economic improvement in the life of people. When people believe that the system works for them. You and I will stop at midnight or 2 in the morning at a traffic light, whether there is a cop or not. Forget about the light, red light. We will stop even at the stop sign. That's called invoking a trust in the system. In India, we have no trust in the system. That's the challenge.
Thank you, Vibhuti, for your very wise observations. We are running out of time. We have already exceeded time, but since we are a small group, we have a couple of guests, and I just want to ask them if they have any questions for our panelists. Madhav Mohan ji, you have any questions or comments?
Can I just interfere again?
Sure.
Okay. Good morning from India. In fact, I'm an odd man out here. I'm Dr. Haricharan Behra. I'm a sociologist primarily. So I was very interested to listen to all of your wonderful deliberations. I was very impressed with all of your nice presentations, particularly on the issues of corruption and all in the system. Yeah, I derived one is on the creation, that is creation or formation. The second one is application or allocation or transfer, whatever you say. And third one is related to administration or governance or accountability. Three things I derived out of all your presentations. I just wanted to tell you, all of you told that this is a problem of system, this could be a problem of organizational culture, it could be a problem of risk or dishonesty, or you could say it moral hazards. This is all I derived today. But being a sociologist, or I should rather suggest all of you also, in future, if you would have a mix of all, at least a few disciplines from other faculties from other disciplines, it would be more wonderful. Yes. What I derived as being an anthropologist or as a sociologist, one important aspect is, the very important aspects, the core, the fundamental of all issues is your culture. Why this system is failure? Why there is corruption of culture of corruption? Why there is a rotten system? Why there is malgovernance? Why there is problem of this or that? The entire system can be resolved. Whether you say that is, we can resolve it through accountability, we can do it by bringing in a good system. How can you bring a good systems? You have a moral mind, a corrupt mind. How can you develop the systems if you have moral hazards? How can you do this? This is the real organizational problem. The major problem that I understand is could not be, I cannot say it, but what I cannot say it with guarantee, but what I believe is a problem with our culture itself. How we have enculturated ourselves, how we have groomed up ourselves in a system. I have understood that, when I'm going and applying for something, I have to pay here and there, some sort of bribe here and there. After all, I came with frustration that it cannot be done. This is how the ordinary people face, particularly in India. You see, visit any rural area, persons are now there, what they're frustrated. They have no faith in the system that they can get their systems. Even problem with creating a system of entrepreneur. The Professor Tiwari was saying the problem is with now the intention, not with the intention. It is the problem with that getting the system done, getting the works done in the beginning itself. We don't have that system in place, particularly in the rural areas also. Everyone is thinking of gaining something. So now problem is that how to create that culture. In order to create that culture, you have to develop a normative culture. How to develop a normative culture? Again, that is a real challenge. Issues are understood. Everyone knows the problems here, and there is a problem. There is a systemic problem. There is
You have made a
issue
point. We
of
don't have
corruption.
time to go into details. We will have some other discussion. I just want to give the last word to Madhav Mohanji. It looks like he has been waiting.
Yes. Thank you.
So we are kind of, we have very extended discussion. So Madhav Mohanji, last comment, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Adityanji. It was quite fascinating to listen to all the panelists, and of course, Tulsi is a very dear friend of mine. I was very excited to see the quotes that you presented from Chanakya. Let me put this in context. Uh, Chanakya, of course, has always stressed the importance of wealth and money. But in his aphorisms, he is extremely farsighted. Sukasya moolam dharma, dharmasya moolam artha, arthasya moolam rajyam, rajyasya moolam indriya nigram. So if you see, the root of sukha is to follow dharma. And you can follow dharma only if you have artha. But you can, artha means economics, money, etc. And if you have artha, then you have everything. And arthasya moolam rajyam means you generate wealth if you have an enterprise or a country with tax revenue. But how do you make sure that that money is sustainable? That is only possible if you have Indriya Nigraham. That means if you have balance in leadership. So ultimately, the root, the objective of creating wealth is sukha.
I perfectly
So
agree with you, Madhav Mohanji, and I will end with a subhashitam. Vidya dadati vinayam,
correct,
vinayat yati patratam, patratvat dhanam apnoti, dhanat dharmam tato sukham. So
correct,
dhanam is not the means, is not the end. There's
correct.
something far beyond that. And I think all of us in our own ways agreed that money is not the only thing, but it is a vehicle for something else. And it's
If I
vehicle.
may interrupt with the last thought, which I've been wanting to share,
Hmm,
I think the banking system as of now is obsolete,
hmm,
and it faces an existential crisis because of things like fintech, etc.,
hmm.
etc. But that's another story. And micro enterprises are a very big thing in India today.
Good, good.
Yeah, technology has brought about a absolutely tectonic shift in technology. There was a Indian guy in Silicon Valley who had come up with a product which would have made the central banking system redundant in the world. Totally. I'm a central banker. I'm a corporate banker. I'm a private banker. I saw this. I saw this happen. And, Federal Reserve, the entire Treasury Department came down heavy on him, saying that this has to be a Treasury Department owned product. So the investors who were from a couple of other countries, they were told to be paid off. They were paid off. US Treasury Department took control of that because I saw it and I said, this will make central banking system redundant. Now their step is to do commercial banks first.
Okay, with that
And
first comment.
decentralized economy is my last word. Thank you.
So with that, we will be ending this discussion. Despite all the, sad stories and issues of dishonesty and corruption, I am still very optimistic that there's hope for India. There are things which are very exciting, which
Right, right,
which
right.
are happening. We are doing, a change in the system, Vyavastha Parivartan, and that is a good omen for India. And with those words, I end this
Thank you.
session. Thank
Pleasure
you,
meeting all
everyone.
of you.
Namaskar.
Pleasure meeting you.
Thanks a lot for spending more than 1.5 hours of your time.
Thank you.
I am
Namaste,
really
everyone.